Sage Gardens and Art Studio, and I thought I'd share a little bit about how I grew up. My dad was career military. He was in the Air Force. He was a staff sergeant for the longest time. I think he got chief master before he retired. And so from the time I was a baby, we were in the military. I was born in South Carolina, and then I think my dad must have had to go somewhere else, and I think we were stationed when I was really little in like Davenport, Iowa, and Sioux City, Iowa. There was two places in Iowa, and then as I think between 4 and 6, I lived in Okinawa, which I remember really well. We moved to Okinawa, and we lived in a Quonset hut off base for a little while until we could get base housing. I was exposed to the native people of Okinawa. My parents had a maid while we were over there, and I've had several interesting things that happened while I was there. Our maid took me to her village, and I got to go visit her and see what her house looked like, and a school. I got to go see a school. They had a wooden building, and everybody took their shoes off even when they went into the schoolroom. My parents didn't get to do that. They didn't get to go visit a local village, but I got to do that, and I remember it pretty well. I can remember being outside playing in a field. This is before we moved on base, and I had bright red hair back then. It's white now, but it was bright red. And the Okinawan kids would come up and say, "Oh, Johto hair," because it was red, and they were so used to black hair. And we moved on base, and one of the things I remember about living on base, we had a typhoon come by, and all of our furniture, and I'm sure this was planned, was had bamboo legs. And so and we also had a drain in the utility room. I mean, I'm sure because of the typhoons, this was planned, and our house was made of concrete. I can remember having to stay in the utility room during the typhoon, and water came into the house. And of course, since it was all on bamboo legs, nothing got really ruined because it wasn't super deep. I can remember my dad cooking pancakes on a camp stove while we were there, during the typhoon. And then afterwards, on the base in Okinawa, the housing was terraced, and at the bottom of each hill was what they called a benjo ditch. It was about 1.5 feet deep, and the water runoff would go rushing through. And so my dad, making it fun, we made some boats and went down and floated our boats in the benjo ditches right after the typhoon. Since they don't have snow there, us kids wouldn't get cardboard boxes, and we would slide down the hills of the terraces in cardboard boxes, and they'd slide down just like you were sliding in the snow. It was fun. I remember most of my memories there were really good ones. We had a lot of fun living there. And when I was 6, we moved to Florida. I lived in Florida for 2 years until I was in 3rd grade. Florida, we lived off base for a little bit, and then back on base as soon as we could get base housing. And so learned to ride a bicycle, and we lived in on base it was a big block, and in the middle of the block it was all the backyards joined. The bases would spray for insects during the summer because the mosquitoes would be so bad, and they were spraying DDT. I can remember my brother and I holding our breaths and running through the DT when we were kids. We're still here, both of us. Somehow we lived through it. Amazing, isn't it? Amazing what you can live through. We didn't have bike helmets. We didn't have seat belts. None of that. And we're still here, somehow. I am a believer in seat belts. I've had a wreck, and I probably would have been dead if I hadn't been wearing my seat belt. But, we never had, when my kids were growing up, they had seat belts. They didn't have car seats for kids. Not safe car seats anyway. Anyway, after Florida, we moved to Massachusetts. And I went to school there from 3rd grade through 7th grade. And on the way moving there, we stopped in Washington, D.C. My uncle was the the fire chief in Washington, D.C., and my aunt was undersecretary to the Secretary of Agriculture. So while we were there, it was my birthday. I was 8, and my aunt and uncle got us a tour of the White House during Kennedy's administration. It was really cool to think about it now, but I was not impressed by the White House. To me, it was just a bunch of furniture. My mom was like, it is so neat to go through here. This is the blue room. This is the green room. This is where Lincoln slept. And I'm like, it's all a bunch of furniture. I just was bored. I wanted to see Caroline and ride her pony. That was my idea. That was what I thought would be fun. But we also went to the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, the zoo. I was impressed with the zoo because you could feed the monkeys. You could throw peanuts to the monkeys and they'd catch them. I'm trying to think of... I know we went to like Mount Vernon, and we probably went one other place I don't remember, but I was also really, really impressed with my uncle because he called a radio station and they said happy birthday to me on the radio. So that had never happened before. And I had a bought birthday cake that was all decorated. Never had one of those before. My mom always made our birthday cakes, and they weren't really decorated. So, but we always had birthday cake. Then we moved, once we moved to Massachusetts, I went to elementary school there. One thing about the East Coast is I took French from the time I was in 3rd grade till 7th grade. We moved back to Iowa. My dad got sent to Vietnam during the Vietnam War for a year. And so we were in Iowa for a year from part of my 7th and 8th grade. And then we would move back to Massachusetts for another 4 years. And I was in the second half of 8th grade through the middle of my senior year. My parents decided to retire to Iowa, and they would not let me stay. I was only 17. I can kind of understand it, but at the time, I had a job. I could have graduated mid-semester. I was good at school, and I had a place I could stay, and I was planning on getting married to a guy there, but anyway, they wouldn't let me. I had to move, and so I started the middle of my senior year in Humiston, Iowa, where there was only 800 people. There was 1,500 kids in my high school in Massachusetts. There wasn't 1,500 people in the whole town. It was culture shock major for me. And so learning to being how I was on the East Coast. I lived 8 years on the East Coast. And people on the East Coast are not the same as people in the Midwest. Midwest people are very, conservative, conscious of how you behave. On the East Coast, they're more direct, a little bit in your face, and they don't take offense at it. Which is why I think a lot of people in the Midwest especially take offense at Donald Trump, because they don't understand this is just how they are on the East Coast, especially New York. New Yorkers are even more so that way. They were somewhat that way where I lived in Massachusetts, but they're more so that way in New York City. Anyway, when I moved back to Iowa and I was in the counselor's office and talking to him, I was used to relating to adults as an adult. And the kids saw me talking to him, and I may have disagreed with him on something, or I don't know. I don't remember having any kind of an argument with him, but the kids saw me, went by and said, "Why were you arguing with Mr. Slimp?" I'm like, I wasn't arguing with him. I was just talking to him. But they thought I was arguing. And so I had to learn how, each time we moved, every part of the United States is a different culture. And you have to learn how to adapt to that culture. So I've learned not only to be independent from my parents, but also how to adapt from culture to culture in the United States. Don't think that just because you all live in the United States, it's all the same. It is not the same. The South is a whole different thing than the East Coast. The East Coast is a whole different thing than the Midwest. And probably from even parts of Missouri are different. When I moved down here to Missouri, it was a whole different story than what I was living with in Iowa. People are much more close-knit community and suspicious of outsiders. It takes a while to get into the community, so I liked it. I'm still in Missouri, obviously. I loved living in Tulsa. Tulsa was a very friendly place. I loved living in Texas. Texas was very friendly, and we thoroughly enjoyed our time there. Almost stayed in Texas because we really liked it, but I really liked Tulsa too. But we ended up moving back to Missouri, and mostly because of job situations. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of give people an idea of what my background is. If you share in the comments if there's any more military brats out there. We have our own way of doing things that we have learned because of growing up in a military family. Sorry, this is bouncing. I'm holding this. I met another girl who grew up in the military, and we always get where we're going early, because if you're in the military, if you're not early, you're late. And so wherever I go, I'm early. And I was talking to my daughter, and she says, "Yeah, if you're not early, I'm worried because something probably has happened to you." And so it happens very, very, something probably has happened to keep me from getting somewhere a little bit early. And I can't help myself. I just plan it so that I get there at least on time, if not 5 or 10 minutes early, wherever I'm going. When we go to church, we're there a half an hour early. We may be waiting outside for people to get out of the last service, but we're there early. Even when my grandkids visit, and I have 2 or 3 of them, I make them get it together, and we're there early, always. Can't help it. Just part of my DNA. But tell me in the comments what kind of habits in your life. If you have a YouTube channel, leave a link so I can check you out. And I just want to appreciate you the way I know you appreciate me.